This, the same drain where we first met a woman living underground. Water and food.
A man picking up trash on the streets of South Los Angeles watched a woman push aside a doghouse sitting on the sidewalk, climb out of a manhole underneath it, and stand there blinking in the daylight. She had been living inside a storm drain beneath the street. But when cleanup crews arrived the next day and looked inside that drain, the conditions were so dangerous that the area was declared a hazardous materials zone. And what the city did next almost killed a man they did not even know was down there. The man who witnessed all of this was Juan Naula. He runs a small nonprofit called Clean LA with Me.
Hi, I'm Juan from Clean LA with Me. We are today picking up trash for free. We're gonna clean this up.
One guy with garbage bags and a mission, trying to make his neighborhood slightly less unbearable. Every week, he walks the streets of South Los Angeles picking up trash, and on March 24th, 2026, he was working near 88th Street and South Grand Avenue, right alongside the 110 freeway, when he saw the woman climb out of the ground.
There's many. Hello, yes.
Nala had seen a lot of things cleaning these streets. Tent cities stretching for blocks, people sleeping in stripped-down cars, entire families living in RVs with no running water. But a person emerging from beneath the sidewalk, using a doghouse as a front door to a storm drain, that was something new entirely. To understand how someone ends up living underground, you need to understand what life looks like above ground in this part of Los Angeles. The area around the 110 freeway near the Broadway Manchester neighborhood is dense with tents, RVs, and accumulated trash. There is even a boat sitting on the street among the encampments. Neighbors describe conditions getting worse for years. Vandalized cars lining the curbs, open drug use on the sidewalks, metal wiring cut from fences and infrastructure, prostitution activity along Figueroa Street, and a general sense among residents that calling the city for help is completely pointless. When KTLA reporters tried dialing 311 to report the situation, they were transferred to the Department of Sanitation, which told them it typically takes up to 90 days for someone to respond to a service call. 90 days. If you called the city about a human being living inside a sewer pipe, surrounded by hazardous waste, the earliest someone might show up is 3 months later. 2 city street sweepers were seen driving through the area that same day. Their cleanup was purely cosmetic. They drove past the encampments without stopping. Nala had already witnessed people emerging from storm drains on 2 separate occasions over the previous 2 weeks. This was not a one-time event. And when Fox 11 reporter Matthew Seedorf arrived at the scene, what the news crew captured on camera was difficult to watch. An exclusive look inside the storm drain revealed piles of garbage, swarming flies, and human waste. The smell was so overpowering that the camera crew had to relocate several blocks away before they could even go live on air.
I gotta get back.
The conditions inside that 10-foot space were so severe that the area would later be declared a hazardous materials zone. The next day, sanitation crews arrived in full protective gear, the kind of equipment you see at chemical spill sites, and began removing waste and debris from the drain near 88th and Grand. Officials described the area as a hot zone. Authorities established a perimeter, keeping the public at least 100 feet away from the opening. This was not a simple cleanup. This was the kind of operation you would expect at an industrial accident, not a residential street in the second-largest city in America. The woman who had been living in that drain was described as clearly distressed and likely suffering from mental illness. When a reporter asked her how she ended up there, she said she did not know.
How many people are living down there with you?
Some guy walked out.
When asked if city officials had ever come by to offer housing, she said they had not. When asked if she would accept a place to stay, she said she would.
If I found you a place to stay, would you go?
Yep. Sure.
You would?
Yep.
No?
I guess I would.
That answer is what makes this story so difficult to process. She wanted help. She would have taken it. Nobody had offered. Juan Naula put it bluntly in an interview that went viral across local news. He said he watched a person living worse than a rat and could not understand why officials were allowing it to happen. He was not blaming the people living underground. He was pointing at the system that pushed them there. The city responded the next day. Sort of. On March 25th, workers arrived at the location near the 110 freeway, covered the manhole with a heavy metal plate, and sealed it with asphalt. They said they were providing the woman with mental health resources. But according to KTLA, she had been seen returning to the same location repeatedly after the seal was placed. Good Samaritans in the neighborhood continued trying to help her on their own. The city's fix lasted less than a day. Seal the hole, move on. But sealing one hole did not solve anything. It just moved the problem somewhere the cameras could not see it. Because the city was now aware of the situation, crews began moving to permanently seal other manholes in the area near 88th Street and Grand Avenue. A welding crew was preparing to close one of the openings for good. They were minutes away from finishing the job. And then someone noticed movement below. A man in his late 20s climbed out of the darkness carrying a suitcase. He emerged, blinking into the daylight, standing there on the sidewalk as the welding crew stared at him. His name was Luis Jimenez. He had been homeless for roughly 10 years, since he was barely an adult, and told reporters he had spent the last couple of nights in the drain because he felt safer underground than he did on the street. The suitcase in his hand held everything he owned. Workers had been moments away from sealing him inside permanently. A young man climbing out of a hole in the ground with a suitcase, seconds before city workers locked that hole forever. Nobody wanted to hurt him. The welding crew simply had not checked whether anyone was still inside before closing it off. Nobody looked down. And that single moment captures everything wrong with how Los Angeles has been handling this crisis. The response is reactive, surface level, and sometimes literally dangerous to the very people it claims to be helping. But this was not limited to one storm drain near the 110 freeway. Just 2 days after the original discovery, on March 26th, city officials and rangers with the Mountains Recreation and Conservation Authority moved into Canoga Park, miles away on the other side of Los Angeles. Inside a storm drain tunnel near the Los Angeles River and Bassett Street, they found another homeless encampment. People had been entering through a manhole on the sidewalk, climbing down into the drainage system and setting up living spaces underground. The tunnel was thick with debris, personal belongings, and the same hazardous conditions found near the 110 freeway. Occupants were removed and placed into temporary housing. The tunnel was cleaned out and sealed. One neighbor near the 88th Street location told reporters that people had been using the storm drains for years, going in and out regularly. The neighbor described it as probably like a little city under the storm drain, with people constantly coming up and going down. About 3 miles away, near 45th Street and Grand Avenue, A visible wire was spotted stretching across the street toward an encampment, an improvised electrical connection rigged from a nearby utility box. Residents in the area also reported a fire hydrant being tapped as a water source. People were not just hiding underground, they were building infrastructure. If this sounds like something out of a dystopian movie, you should know that Los Angeles is not even the first city where this has happened. And compared to what exists beneath Las Vegas, the LA storm drains are almost small scale. Underneath the Las Vegas Strip, beneath the flashing lights and the billion-dollar casinos, there are over 600 miles of storm drainage tunnels. And inside those tunnels, an estimated 1,500 people have built an entire underground community. These are not people huddled in empty pipes. One couple, Stephen and Catherine, built a 400-square-foot underground home, complete with a double bed, a wardrobe for their clothes, and a bookshelf lined with paperbacks. They decorated the concrete walls and organized their belongings the way anyone would in a studio apartment. Other tunnel residents have built shelving units, hung clothes in makeshift closets, and created living rooms with salvaged furniture arranged for comfort. One resident told a CBS News crew that you have to ask permission before walking through someone's section of tunnel because it is their private space. You knock before you enter, just like any neighborhood above ground, except this one exists in total darkness, 20 feet below a casino parking lot. Originally built in the 1990s to manage flash floods in the Las Vegas Valley, these tunnels were never intended for human habitation. But as housing costs climbed and affordable options disappeared, more and more people moved below. Flash floods during monsoon season can fill the drainage system with rushing water in minutes, sweeping away everything and everyone in their path. People have died down there, washed away during storms they never saw coming. And yet people stay, because the alternative, sleeping exposed on the streets of Las Vegas where living outdoors has been criminalized, feels worse. In the tunnels, at least there is darkness and quiet. At least nobody moves you along at 3 in the morning. The Shine a Light Foundation, a nonprofit run largely by formerly homeless volunteers, sends teams into the tunnels regularly to deliver food, hygiene supplies, and first aid. Their outreach director, Robert Banghart, has said that every person living in those tunnels is a life worth saving. But the foundation also recognizes a difficult reality. Nobody is coming out until they are ready. You cannot force someone to leave. You can only build enough trust that when the moment comes, they know help is there. Now, if you are someone who is going through a rough patch right now, or you know someone who is, I put together something called the Veteran's Blueprint. It walks through real, practical steps for people who are starting over from zero. Resource lists, survival strategies, things that rarely get discussed publicly. I linked it in the description. And if you are someone who wants to help but does not know where to start, it covers that too. Back to Los Angeles. The numbers behind this crisis are staggering. According to the 2025 Greater Los Angeles homeless count, over 72,000 people were experiencing homelessness across the county. About 43,700 of those were within the city of Los Angeles itself. Officials celebrated the fact that homelessness had declined for the second year in a row, a 4% drop countywide and a 3.4% drop in the city. But those numbers tell a misleading story. A separate study by RAND researchers found that while the overall unsheltered count held steady, the number of people sleeping rough, meaning without even a tent, vehicle, or makeshift shelter, had risen by 20% and reached its highest level in 4 years of monitoring. The official count went down slightly, but the people in the worst conditions were actually increasing. The storm drains are proof of that. Los Angeles has spent billions trying to address homelessness. The state of California launched a $1.3 billion home key initiative. The city and county have allocated over $2.6 billion in funding to purchase and build housing. And yet, people are living in sewer pipes beneath the freeway. The gap between money spent and results achieved is where the real story lives. Cleanups happen and encampments return within hours. Juan Naula described it perfectly. The city comes and cleans, and not even 2 hours later, the same spot looks exactly like it did before. Outreach teams arrive, and individuals decline services or walk away, not because they do not want help, but because the help being offered is often a temporary shelter bed that expires in a few weeks and puts them right back on the street. Mental health resources are offered through systems so overburdened that connecting someone with actual treatment can take months. And the woman in the storm drain near the 110 freeway was offered mental health resources only after the media showed up and broadcast her living conditions on the evening news. She had been underground for who knows how long before that. Nobody from the city had knocked on her doghouse. This is not a problem that started in 2026. Residents near the 110 freeway told reporters that people have been using the drain systems for years without anyone in the city government doing a thing about it. The storm drain encampments are just the latest visible evidence of a crisis that keeps getting pushed out of sight. When enforcement clears tents from one city block, people move to the next block. When sidewalks get swept clean for the cameras, people retreat to the banks of the Los Angeles River. When the riverbanks get cleared by conservation authorities, people go underground. Each wave of enforcement does not solve homelessness. It just makes homeless people harder to see. And each time they become more invisible, the conditions they endure become more dangerous. A tent on a sidewalk is bad. A camp under a bridge is worse. A person sleeping in a storm drain filled with hazardous waste and flash flood risk is as dangerous as it gets. And Los Angeles has reached that point. Juan Naula's frustration captures the feeling of many people watching this unfold. The city comes and cleans, and not even 2 hours later, it looks exactly the same. He said he is just one guy, just one person trying to do something. And he is right. One man with a trash bag cannot solve a crisis that has swallowed an entire city. But there are people trying. The Mountains Recreation and Conservation Authority coordinates cleanups in partnership with outreach workers who offer shelter placements during operations. Campus for Hope recently broke ground on a facility in Las Vegas with 900 beds that will offer addiction recovery, job training, and childcare. The Shine a Light Foundation continues its work in the Las Vegas tunnels, building relationships one person at a time. And in Los Angeles, activists and community members keep showing up, keep picking up trash, keep asking their elected officials why a city with a gross domestic product larger than most countries cannot house its own people. The story of the storm drains is not really about storm drains. It is about what happens when a society decides that certain people are acceptable losses, when housing becomes so expensive that working full-time still does not cover rent, when mental health treatment is available in theory but inaccessible in practice. When the response to someone living in a sewer is to seal the sewer and call it progress. The woman near the 110 freeway said she would accept housing. Luis Jimenez climbed out of a drain with a suitcase and a decade of homelessness behind him. Somewhere beneath Las Vegas, Stephen and Catherine are sleeping in a bed they built underground, next to a bookshelf, pretending for a few hours that concrete walls are the same as home. These are not statistics. They are people who had lives before the streets swallowed them. Every one of them has a name. Every one of them had a moment where things went wrong and nobody caught them. If you want to understand how we got here, How a country with this much wealth ended up with people furnishing storm drains like apartments. You have to look past the individual stories and into the systems that failed them long before they ever climbed down a manhole. Housing policy, mental health funding, addiction treatment, the gap between wages and rent. These are the pipes beneath the pipes, the invisible infrastructure that either holds a society together or lets people fall through. And right now in Los Angeles, people are falling through in the most literal sense imaginable. Subscribe if you want to see more stories like this one. These are the stories that do not get told often enough, and the people living them deserve to be seen. Click the video on screen right now. It connects directly to what we just talked about.